Do you like the idea of using a cheap notebook, but you don't really know exactly what you want to put in it? I'm going to give you a window into mine. I did a little recap of my winter 2025 notebook. I do a 2-month season rather than a 3-month quarter. And my winter notebook, I'm going to recap what part of it was made up of what kind of things for you. I gotta say, it was really interesting doing this analysis, but I'm one of those kind of numbers geeks. So 20% of my winter notebook were my daily pages or my pages with my daily logs. In the past, I've tried 1 page per day. I've done it in the same kind of a spiral. I've done it in smaller notebooks and I like it, but on this kind of a notebook, 1 page per day was too much. And so I just decided I'm going to go, and again, the beauty of the notebook is you can take as much or as little room as you want. You can see this year when I started off using this spiral notebook and doing 2 columns, and that just did not work for me. My whole point of liking the size notebook is I like to write big, and this was just too constricting. So this did not last for very long, but I was giving it a try. I also tried recording various different things in the notebook, and I was trying to record my meals, and I was recording I was doing plans versus recording what I did. And I just settled on it's really just recording things I've done, random thoughts, tiny bits of journaling, but really it's mostly a log of what I've accomplished for the day. Notice my colors. I, for years now, have had a set of colors, one for each day. I think I got it originally, the idea from the Simplified Planner. I use the Stabilo Boss highlighters for this, and I don't use them for anything else. I just have one color per day. And you can see as I moved through the weeks this year, I tried different things and I included more color. I started out with just some dots or just some lines, and then I moved on to eventually entirely boxing each day in color, and that's what works for me. I liked the colors down the sides and across the bottom of the page. I'm including one of my March pages here just so you see the difference, right? If it's not closed at the bottom, that means that day is included on the next page as well. It's not complete. And so my system has really evolved. You see a few other little important improvements that I'll talk about more some other time. The next section that you probably want to include, or you might want to include, is a weekly, I struggle here. I'm going to call it my weekly practice. You'll see here, this one says my weekly reset, happened to also be the end of January, so I said monthly, weekly, but whatever your weekly thing is. I'm a GTDer at heart, so I tend to revert to weekly review, but also that has some baggage with it. I was a full focus planner user for quite a while, and they call it the weekly preview, but you're also doing 1/3 of it is reflecting, 1/3 of it is reviewing, and 1/3 of it is previewing or planning the next week. So I don't like the word preview. I've used the word reset. Yeah, that's what I said on the one that I'm including. And so I'm just settling on weekly practice. That's why I'm calling this channel productivity practice. I'm calling that my weekly practice. It's really the hub of the system, right? If you need to sit down at some point, and again, weekly is the most common cadence for this, and whether you're just planning ahead, reviewing, reflecting, and I'll say more what I mean about those differences because maybe you don't think of those things as being different. I think the shortest one this year was so far was 2 pages, and the longest one was 5 pages. The next 2 sections, I'm only going to share one picture, and it's kind of barely fits into that category. Even though these 2 sections together account for almost half of my 133 pages for my winter season, they are all some combination of boring, ugly, and too personal. The way that I grouped them, 30% of my pages I put in a category called notes, project support, brain dumps, and random lists. 12.5% I've got in a category for working on my system overall, my project lists, my theme for the year, my goals. Only thing I'm going to say here is that I went crazy in January, and we do this in January. That's the kind of people we are. I printed out various things for projects and mini projects, and I wrote up way too much. that is not sustainable. So February, I just kept using the stuff I did in January, and then in March, I did a real reset, and I'll show that at some point, but not right now. The one page that I am showing that I lumped into this was a random thoughts. I decided to make a weekly planning page. It's really kind of like a big Hobonichi Weeks page with the Monday through Sunday vertically, or the right side of the horizontal plum paper planner layouts. That's difficult to say. And I really like it. I didn't particularly like it in the notebook, so I did make a form for it, and I'm just keeping it outside the notebook. I will share it at some point. Let me know if you're interested to see that and how it's working for me. The last section is, again, another 12.5% left here, but it's probably the most interesting, but also ugly, and I don't know. We'll see what you think. But in this 12.5%, I'm calling it tracking and associated pages. And a couple of the pages were finances. I tried to do them in their own category, but it was only 2 pages out of the 133. So I'm going to talk about the finances first. Obviously, I'm not going to share a lot of financial stuff. So I just pulled up the document I made in Pages and sharing that here. So I use YNAB for my budgeting and keeping track of things financial. I do, write some other stuff out. I've done it quarterly, biannually, whatever. But anyway, the one page is just a straight bill paying checklist list that I have. I'm not going to share that. But this page that I'm sharing is where I take the category amounts in YNAB and I do some analysis on the ones that we kind of need to keep an eye on. So there's always the question when you're doing budgeting stuff, how granular should you get? And so I opted for more granular in YNAB, but when I pull it out, I don't need to look at, I don't need to analyze my mortgage or my whatever, because they are just what they are. But things like groceries and stuff. So I take these top 3 categories, snacks and drinks. So things like getting a coffee or getting a beer or getting a pastry, that's snacks and drinks. I take that category and groceries and dining out, and I subtotal those. And those 3 I look at as a whole, because one week we might be dining out a lot, and one week we might buy a lot of groceries. So if I look at those as a whole, it kind of is more telling than looking at one versus the other. And so you can see the categories I've got here. Those are the ones that I kind of like to look at from week to week and see how they compare and what do they look like, not just, over the month, but how we're going there. And now we get to my checklist type planners. So my months that I'm using are not like 1 through 31 or 1 through 30. I'm using Monday through Sunday weeks, and each month is either 4 or 5 weeks. So you can see on this January tracker, it goes 12/30 through February 2nd. It's 5 weeks in January. February is 4 weeks. I started out as simply as I could. You can see in January that it was just, rows and columns, and that's it. I work in Pages when I make these kinds of things, Apple Pages. I like it for graphic stuff. I really was trying not to complicate it, and I was really trying not to overthink how often things should occur. I just listed what I listed. Early on, I realized I needed some vertical lines and some horizontal lines, so I didn't just have one big grid. So I drew in those horizontal lines in January, and you'll see when I get to February, I put in some shading and some vertical lines. So this first one, it says upkeep. I don't like the word cleaning. It has bad connotations for me, and also it's just too narrow. So upkeep is my broad term for anything cleaning, home maintenance, pets, personal maintenance, kind of like all the home sort of regular things you got to do, watering plants and such. The second tracker that I set up each month is for, I was going to say bigger things, but not necessarily bigger things, but things that I'm working on more intentionally. So I was really focused on the word systems in January. And then in February, you'll see my priorities shift a little bit. And then see towards the end of February, wow, my priority shifted and there's a whole lot of blank space. But, that's what happens. Ebbs and flows. In March, I have the same 2 sheets going. And on this more intentional sheet, it's just got a lot more narrative on it. Before I move on to my other kinds of trackers, I have a question for you. When you think of a tracker, are you thinking of it in terms of being a planning type thing or a recording type thing? Parker evidently has an opinion, but I'd like to know what you think. I've got my thoughts. Parker has hid slots. I would like to know what you think before I give you mine. So I'll share that at some point, but I'd like to know what you think. So on to my calendar trackers. I have had these for different things for many years. I would just print out landscape calendars and, have like 4 to 8 different landscape calendars I kept in rings, and would record things on there. So this is what I've progressed to. And again, I was really trying not to make a bunch of stuff that made work for me at the beginning of each month. In January, I ended up using for the monthlies pdfcalendar.com. I enjoy that website. They're kind of ugly, but it has a lot of flexibility in its functionality. The first one that I'm sharing with you is a health stats one, obviously with lots of stuff blurred out, but that was a portrait oriented one with, I probably printed this at like 80% or so. The next page I'll show you is for my volunteer service that I do. I need to keep track of my hours and eventually enter them into a website. And so that's where I said PDF calendar says it will do up to 12 weeks on a page, but this is a vertical page with 13 weeks. And I made 4 of these for the year for my volunteer service. The last couple are tracking dinners and tarot cards. So the dinners, notice I added a page at the bottom also for the following month, so I could like schedule ahead the things if we have it and we know we want to have it again, and I don't know, maybe in a couple weeks or 3 weeks. I've done that from time to time successfully. I did it a little bit in January. I've set that up again in February and March and haven't been so successful with it, but it's a great idea. Mostly shared the tarot one just to show you that in February I have opted to go ahead and make my own calendars in Apple Pages, and in March continued that. And sometimes it's just nice to have things pretty and put a little bit of time in, but you certainly don't have to. You can certainly draw all this out. So there are the 5 different categories of things that I could come up with in my winter notebook. I hope you got some ideas there. If you have some ideas, share with me. Ask that question in the middle of the video. I'd like to hear your answer to that. Thanks for being here. Like and subscribe, and hope to see you back again soon. Thanks.